don't have to take. You want to take a
roll call?
Well, do you take a roll call?
Yes, I can do that if you would like.
Well, let's go.
Yeah, I think just to be.
Let's go live first, and then do the roll call.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Right after. No, I'm
This
just asking.
conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Yes, we are live streaming now, and we are ready to go, Ms. Montgomery.
Great, thank you so much. Welcome to Compliance Committee of the State Medical Board. And Mr. Taylor, would you mind calling a roll for the committee?
Ms. Montgomery?
Yes.
Obviously present. Mr. Giacalone?
Here.
Dr. Schottenstein?
Here.
Dr. Cockralla?
Present.
Also, all of the committee members are present. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Benton. We have a pretty brief agenda. First of all, have all of you had a chance to read the minutes? And if so, I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as drafted.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Schottenstein, seconded by Dr. Cockralla. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. The minutes have been accepted. Our first order of business is to talk about the OPHP follow-up and to talk about evaluations and that we have with regard to proposals with whom we refer folks to in-house or outpatient care. And I think I'm going to turn that over to Brandy. You wrote a memo for us, and perhaps you'd like to start by telling us about that. There you are.
Yep, thank you. So at the last committee meeting, there were
Brandy, could you speak up? Or Brenton,
can you hear me?
Could you turn that up? Turn your microphone up.
Can you hear me better now?
No. Either that or you're going to have to lean into your microphone a bit. Since we're live streaming, and this is...
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
That's
okay.
Better.
Thank you. Okay, so at the last meeting, there was some discussion regarding the 72-hour assessments, and this has been an ongoing discussion that the committee members have had regarding physicians and other licensees receiving these evaluations via OPHP, and what cluster of individuals that we license can be put into an outpatient category. And one of the committee members had brought up at the last meeting wanting to gather a little bit more of information regarding what other licensing boards are doing in that area. And so I worked with OPHP. They provided this information, and it just outlines essentially what other boards are doing and how those referrals are happening and what kind of assessments different licensees are receiving.
So, Brandy, what are your general conclusions of that? And then Mr. Giacalone has a question.
So the general conclusion is that the medical board has the most rules and regulations regarding what types of evaluations need to occur. Other licensing boards allow OPHP to kind of make a decision clinically based on what they feel is best. But in that realm, it shows us that we're moving in the right direction with the recommendations we've made regarding the clusters of keeping certain professionals in the cluster for 72 hours and other professionals in the clusters for the outpatient. So this just outlines that we're almost mirroring what's already being done with other licensing agencies.
So there's not a model or best practice model out there. You've seen variations throughout the states that you've been able to talk to.
So this would be just the OPHP within Ohio, and just our evaluations here in Ohio. And so OPHP's their best practices is based on the recommendations of of what's clinically appropriate for individuals for these evaluations.
Mr. Jackalone, you had a question?
Yeah, Brett, just one question. I noticed for chiropractors, optometrists, and veterinarians, you got as necessary in parentheses. What does that mean?
So what that means is that the OPHP, they have the ability to initially evaluate those individual licensees who are coming in, and through their evaluation process there at OPHP, they can make a determination of what they feel is most clinically appropriate, whether it's the 72-hour evaluation or the outpatient evaluation.
Okay, so it's totally up to their discretion which bucket they fall into.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
So your general conclusion is, as you look over the boards that have referrals to OPHP, is this if it's a doctorate level or above a doctorate level, they generally are going to be going into inpatient, and if they're not, a 24-hour evaluation outpatient is what it's done.
Correct. Yes. When it says as necessary, like so with chiropractors, they're usually finding that if there is an evaluation that is needed, if it's necessary, it's generally that 72-hour evaluation.
We've talked about this before, about the efficacy between outpatient and inpatient. And in the course of your conversations with OPHP, I just want to summarize that for purposes of anybody who's listening on live stream, because I think we all know, but can you just briefly describe the difference in the quality?
Sure. Between the outpatient and the 72-hour evaluation. Yeah. So both are useful and effective evaluation tools. It's just that one provides a 3-day inpatient, very comprehensive, lots of testing. That's that 72-hour, whereas the outpatient evaluation is still a very clinically effective tool. And it is a lengthy evaluation. From what OPHP has said, it lasts, hours long. And so there's just the difference in just the time frame. And so the time frame OPHP has given us on that 72 hours, they feel that at those higher level education individuals sometimes need that 72 hours to really let things sink in. That a lot of them have busy practices, have very successful careers, and it just takes maybe a little bit longer in that 72-hour evaluation for them to really get that buy-in and really kind of get committed.
Just get past the acknowledgement that there's an issue.
Sure.
So moving on, and we know that there's a big price differential in the costs. So that's very helpful to us. And our next steps on that is to make recommendations, I think, as committee to the full board. Is that correct? Randy?
Yes.
At this point, are we at a pivot point where we can now say to the board, we'd like to recommend that we change our policy and make that recommendation to the board as a whole?
Yes.
You have rules in your rule package today to that effect for the full board meeting.
So we'll have to at least recommend that by vote of the committee. Is that correct? Stephanie, do you want us
Yes.
to vote, recommend it?
So that was our takeaway from the last meeting, and then this was the follow-up. So I don't know that we officially voted on the proposal for rules for today, but that was our takeaway, was to draft rules to bring back this time. So
Right.
I think if you would like to do a committee vote for the rule package that's there now, I think that would be helpful.
I think, yes, Dr. Rotherman.
I'd just like to make a quick comment that although I know we have no jurisdiction over the nursing board, I continue to have concerns that under the nursing, it says everything is outpatient. And I strongly believe that nurse practitioners who, even in some cases, practice independently, should have the same evaluation level as a physician. And if they're all clumped under one thing in the nursing board, it's concerning to me. Just a comment.
Thank you, Dr. Rothermill. Do anybody have any comments about the proposed rules, proposed suggestions with regard to rules? And if not, then we'll just ask for a motion to accept the recommendation and rules as presented to us in our packet. Is that all right?
So moved. So
Moved
moved.
by Dr. Schottenstein. Is there a second?
Second, Dr. Monroe.
All right, there's been a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. It passes. We move on to the MAC follow-up to the MAC letter. And you're on, Brandy, you're on again. You have a memo in front of you all.
Thank you. Thank you. So again, this is something we had discussed last month. And this is just a follow-up with some information from the conversation that occurred from that committee meeting. After the last committee meeting, I provided you all with a copy of the FMSB recommendations regarding questions for substance abuse and mental health on application and renewal questions for licensees. And so we provided some information here that shows you some stats related to the responses that we get on our application renewals and initial. So in the initial application, we have the question where it asks about 5 years, and it gives you the responses down here of those questions. And then we also did the renewal responses, and there's no mental health questions on renewal, but there are substance abuse questions. So it just shows you how many answers we're actually getting, and how many people are really responding. And, you know, we don't get a lot of people who do respond and provide information about their substance abuse or mental health. And so we also decided to look at other states to see what other states were doing. And that was something we talked about at the last committee meeting. One of Kim's staff had provided a comprehensive report of every single state that they could, most states responded, but every state they could get to respond, what kind of questions, what kind of look back they had, whether it was 2 years, 5 years, ever current. And so I followed up with a couple of states just to gather some basic information about why they made changes, why they are a 2 year, why they are a 5 year, why they are never. And so this just outlines just some basic information. It was a really short amount of time to get in touch with a number of different states. So these were just kind of some highlights from just a variety of different states who do things differently for you guys just to look at and kind of see where they're at.
Brandy, did you come to a conclusion regarding a general practice or best practice looking around with the survey?
When looking around, I did hear that a number of states did make changes, whether it was for the time frame for the look back or for the questions, based on what the FMSB recommendations were. A lot of them were motivated to make changes in that area. I had a couple other states that did keep statistics, like smaller states like North Dakota, who just has one staff member who was able to identify information pretty quickly. They were able to say that, you know, there really wasn't a difference in responses that they were getting between a 2 year and a 5 year. And so that's kind of the takeaway. Is I think the main thing is really they were following those FMSB recommendations.
We lost your audio, Betty.
Let me see if I can get that.
Are we having trouble here, or is it just
You're
me?
back.
We can hear you now. We didn't hear that first sentence that you had said, but we can hear you now. Okay.
Brandy, I found Brandy's presentation the last couple of minutes garbled, but if nobody else had a problem with it, I know what she's saying generally, but So Brandy, you're saying there's a general, there's no general best practice?
Sorry. So
Brandy?
yeah, everybody's, can you hear me? Okay. So everybody is around of all 50 states. There's a variety of ways that they're asking the questions. There's a variety of years that they're looking at. So I didn't really see any main trends. Just basically that the FMSB was where they were looking at, and that they weren't getting a lot of responses affirmatively.
So there's no general best practice. Okay. So our question, I think, for the committee is one: do any of you have any suggestions or comments that you want to make about whether we ask questions on mental health? Then two, obviously, we have to worry about look back on mental health as well as any other, for example, substance abuse or any kind of criminal behavior reflecting a substance abuse or mental illness issue. So we've got a look back question.
I think
Big Betty's frozen again.
Yes, that appears to.
okay, there she is. But Ms. Montgomery, you were frozen again. Maybe Dr. Schottenstein.
We've got do we have questions? And if so, what is
I think
Dr.
she keeps.
Schottenstein, want to go ahead with your question? I'm going to text Ms. Montgomery that she's having some.
I can hear you now. Dr. Schottenstein.
Okay. I think you're having some connection problems, Betty.
Well, thanks very kindly. So I guess the thought that I had is that, sorry. So I guess the thought that I had was, as I was looking this over, that, it did seem like there was movement toward the FSMB recommendations. And I also had this sense that there, is likely an underreporting of affirmative responses. I mean, especially on the substance use questions, because it's a remarkably low number of affirmative responses by licensees to addiction dependency, the addiction dependency question. And, so that concerns me. And it made me think again about the Attorney General's Rat Back program, which, gives us corroborating evidence as to whether or not there's any legal issues, just in terms of doing what we can do to make sure that we get the information that we need. So my thought was that we would be right to entertain going from a 5-year look back to a 2-year look back. I remember Ms. Montgomery previously saying that she would want some, some look back, not particularly just looking at current status only. And I think, what FSMB recommended was, 2 years or less. And so I would be comfortable moving to the 2-year time frame. It seems like, we saw some other states from this memo that moved in that direction. And so just glad to know what the committee's thoughts are on that matter. And again, I would just say, in terms of the Rat Back program, when I look at the memo under North Dakota, what it states is that they noticed that they really only received affirmative answers regarding the look back for substance use issues if there was also an affirmative response to things like a DUI or things like that. So that is something that I would also be interested in pursuing, potentially moving to a 2-year look back, but potentially looking into the wrap back option more at length. Thank you.
May I jump in just to respond to Dr. Schottenstein quickly on the
Thank you,
wrap-back?
Dr. Schottenstein.
Thank you.
Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
So we have started our
Go
research
ahead.
on the
You had it.
wrap-back.
I just want to make sure you could hear me before we went on. Go ahead.
So we have started our research on the wrap-back program.
Okay.
And so I think we'll have something to bring back to you at the next meeting to talk about that. The other option that, or in addition to that we're exploring is, again, when we take legislation forward for our Strauss package, where we're asking people, we're talking about this duty to report, including language that we would have certain criminal convictions reported to us immediately. So putting that onus on the licensee to report to us. That's probably a pretty common practice in other professions. And so we think that we might have, like I said, we'll bring back the wrap back research. We do know there's a cost to it. We do know there's a delay in the reporting. We do know it only gives us Ohio information. And so we think we might get a better response by making that a mandatory report from the licensees for certain types of convictions, such as, the sexual misconduct or certain types of criminal convictions, including OVIs and impairment related convictions.
Thank you, Stephanie. Mr. Giacalone?
Yeah.
Mr. Giacalone?
Yes, thanks, Betty. Here's my 2 cents. I look at the response rates and they're minuscule, 0.03%, 0.2. It's your point, Michael. Either we have just a stellar group or we're not getting it. So I guess my comment is, why we bother changing it? Do we think that's going to change anything? We think we're moving it to a different level. We're going to get deluge of people. I think it's honestly, it's almost like we're fixing a problem that's not going to be fixed. If people aren't reporting, they're not reporting. I think to your point, Michael, about getting the information about convictions, that's actually more beneficial. But I don't, honestly, we can go switch it. I think it's a waste of time personally, because I don't think it's going to change anything.
Well, Mr. Giacalone, I think I would have to agree with you. We're not getting the truth, obviously, in the answers. So, but it's important to ask the question. It gives you, quite frankly, if you're in a position where you have, for example, a physician that you have really troubles with, to be able to bring as part of the charging document or the citation the failure to properly report. That's an easy one to prove.
I don't disagree with you, Patty. I don't disagree with you at all. And I don't disagree with you at all. I think we need to leave it in there. I would actually leave it at 5, because if they're not reporting, that's another violation if it moves out to 5 as opposed to 2. So I would leave it in there, because look, if they're not reporting at 5, they're not reporting at 2.
Stephanie, when you look at when you're going to start to present to us about wrap back, these renewals occur every 2 years, correct?
Correct. That's right.
And that may be part of the theory about only looking back 2 years. But we have any ability to consider doing a background, a BCI check as part of the renewal process, to look at any convictions, arrests that might give us some notification that, we've got a problem here?
Well, that certainly would be, wrap back would be one variation of that. We do not do a background check upon renewal. We ask them to disclose. It could be, I would say, very administratively burdensome to deal with renewals and background checks. That being said, we also have OLEG that our investigators use quite frequently, where they can in real time check for some of those concerns. I'll use an example. We just went through 1,250 licensees in the historical look back report. And we did have some folks that we found who did not report things to us, but it was a very small percentage. I think our administrative burden of the background checks upon renewal would be far outweighed by what we can find either in an OLEG or again in a statutorily mandated reporting to us.
Okay. Dr. Schottenstein.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated Mr. Jacquelone's comments about the 5-year versus the 2. I don't think that the reason we would go to 2 is because we thought we would get a higher response rate. I don't think that's ever been the thought behind that. I think the thought behind that is to minimize any kind of discrimination against licensees regarding a past history of things like mental health or dependency or things like that. Basically, that the board knows what it has to know to keep the public safe, but not more than that, essentially. And then to Stephanie's earlier point, yeah, that certainly makes sense about the immediate reporting requirement. I can't imagine that there's a reason not to have that. And then the last thing I just wanted to bring up is, the application process is a public matter, right? In other words, the applications are public. Is there a way that we can minimize the exposure of the applications? In other words, keep the application responses private when it comes to things like this?
That's a question, Dr. Schottenstein, I have written down here myself about the public records, and is there any way we can shield responses on an application? And it may be something in your package, Stephanie, you could consider, unless you folks here at the committee don't think that that is wise.
Yeah.
I think we already do that. We